Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. This is Dark Horse Comics, and we are live to bring you a little preview of our Mike Mignola extensive backlist. Getting a little echo, making sure that goes away. Great. Okay, so I'm Kara. I work at Dark Horse in our marketing department, and with me today, I am pleased to welcome our special guests from my Dark Horse team, actually, Brett Israel and Jenny Blenk. Thank you for joining us, both of you. Welcome. Welcome to your own homes, because we are all, of course, working from home and streaming from home. Because comic shops and our distributors are also affected, of course, by the quarantine conditions. Single issue comics, as you may know, are currently on hold. So some of our newer series and newer announcements are paused for the moment. Brett and Jenny are here today to help me talk about our extensive library of Mike Mignola comics. Could you, Jenny, and then Brett, could you tell us a little bit about what you do at Dark Horse and which Mignola books you have worked on most recently?
Yeah, thanks, Kara. My name's Jenny Blenk. I use she, her pronouns, and right now I have the distinct honor of being the assistant editor on the Mignolaverse books. So everything from Hellboy and the BPRD to BPRD, Witchfinder, everything that's associated with that. I'm working on both new content that we'll hopefully be able to announce soon. And then I'm also helping to collect some of the older material if we're re-releasing it as a collection or in special cases like this, some free online content. So I get to work with Mike, all of his associated collaborators, and of course, editor Katie O'Brien.
Thank you. How about you, Brett?
Yeah, sorry, let me, my cat Roger here is kind of all over. So I'm an associate editor at Dark Horse, but I don't work on any Mignola books right now. But way back, it seems like a billion years ago when I was an intern, I helped out on a lot of those books. I think the main thing that I did a lot of work on was a timeline that has been, now it's kind of all over the place, but it's on the back of some of our prints if you get them at shows. I went through every Mignola comic that we did to track it, to like track dates and that kind of stuff. But I also, on the recent BPRD Hell on Earth hardcover collections, I did a lot of work on that as well. Yeah.
Apparently, I'm going to be joined by a cat today as well. But that's fine. Movie Hellboy loves cats, so hopefully he'll approve. This is Lucius. Say hello to the world, Lucius. Roger, I think, should probably be promoted to some sort of assistant editor with you, Brett, especially since he has to endure that cone.
Yeah, he's the cone boy now, but yeah.
Well, I do want to touch on a couple more things before we get into our full Mignolaverse Q&A. I'm excited to announce, actually, right now here live on this stream, that in addition to some other special guests that we will have on Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time here on Twitch, we announced yesterday that we will be joined by Warwick Johnson Cadwell, who is an amazing artist. He's worked with us on Our Encounters with Evil, Mr. Higgins Comes Home. They're fantastic, fun books, not in the Hellboy universe necessarily, but in collaboration with Mike Mignola in that kind of Hammer style of like classic horror films. So he'll be joining us on Friday to do some live drawing and also chat about those books. We'll also have author Chris Golden. I'm very excited to welcome him. He's the writer on Baltimore, Joe Golem, and just a fantastic Mignola collaborator as well. But new, not yet announced, Ben Stenbeck will also be joining us. We are in extremely different time zones. I think we're spread out now in 4 of the most widely different time zones you can be. So 11 a.m. Pacific is the time of that stream, and hopefully Ben will be awake because I know if it were me, I probably wouldn't be, because it'll be very early for him. But thank you, Ben, for joining us. He will also be live drawing alongside Warwick, and we'll be chatting with all three of them about their work in the Mignolaverse on Friday. So come back on Friday to catch that stream. I think it'll be a lot of fun, live drawing, Q&A, and all of that good stuff. Today, we will be doing a giveaway, and that giveaway is now open. All you need to do is enter the keyword in the chat once and only once, more than once, and you will be disqualified. But it is hashtag or # frogs, FROGS, because, I mean, this is the Mignolaverse after all. The prize to our one lucky giveaway winner is a copy of Hellboy Omnibus Volume 1. The Hellboy Omnibus series is a newer set of editions. They're all paperback, which means they're, in my opinion, a little easier to handle, actually. And it's a lower price point than the big, fat library editions. Of course, those are still available for collectors if you like hardcovers like me. But the omnibus editions are especially good for people who are newer to the Hellboy universe. They collect the stories in chronological order. So there are 4 main volumes in the omnibus series, and then 2 that are short story collections. The short story collections are fantastic and also a great jumping on point. But Volume 1, Seed of Destruction, is an excellent place, especially for newer readers, if you want to get into Hellboy. So that is the prize for the giveaway today. That will run throughout our stream, and we'll draw one winner near the end of our stream. Probably, I'm looking at like around 2:30 maybe. So hang in there with us, and we'll draw a winner later on. We are going to get into a Q&A. I have some questions for my friends here, and then you who are in the chat with us are welcome to also ask questions as we go along. Our mod team will be looking out for those, and we'll ask as many as we can today in the time that we have. And just remember to be respectful in our chat and be excellent to each other. I think so far everybody's been doing a great job with that. So thank you, and we're excited to take your questions and chat about the extensive Mignola Comics universe with you. So we're also going to talk about some digital offers that we have for you right now. Since we are all at home, hopefully staying safe and healthy, we're offering a lot of digital deals on our digital comics. These are available at Dark Horse Digital and also mirrored on services like Comixology and others. Brett, I think you were going to tell us about one of our sales.
Yes. So right now, everything on Dark Horse Digital is 50% off. That'll include every book we talk about today. That'll be every book that Dark Horse has available on digital. It's all 50% off. It's all great. So if you are looking for something to read in this craziness, there's lots there, and it's all on sale. So you should check it out. But we also have an extra 50% off of kids' titles, such as books like Itty Bitty Hellboy. But you use the code Comics for Kids at checkout. It's all lowercase, all one word, and it's the number 4, so Comics for Kids. That's the code.
Exactly.
Kind of jumping off what Brett said too. If you're looking for something new to read, maybe you're not sure if you want to buy it, even at the 50% off right now. A lot of our number 1s are available for free right now. So you go to digital.darkhorse.com. And you can find a bunch of number 1s. You can try them out, see if you like the series, see if it calls to you. We also have some select full books that are available for free right now from our backlist. One of those is a personal favorite of mine, which is Hellboy Volume 1, started it all, which is Seed of Destruction. So you can find those all on Dark Horse Digital, which is digital.darkhorse.com.
Perfect. And we'll drop those links in the chat throughout as well. That volume of Seed of Destruction is different than the Omnibus collection, which I mentioned earlier. So they are 2 different things. Fear not. Well, thank you both for covering those. Like I said, we'll drop links in the chat throughout. Pretty easy to find. Dark Horse Digital is also available as an app on iOS and Android both. So you can use it on all of your devices. So we've talked a little bit about your roles and which Mignola titles you've worked on. Jenny and Brett, were you fans of Hellboy, BPRD, or other Mignola titles before you started at Dark Horse, or have you become one over the course of working?
Well, I think the first time I read a Hellboy, it was in a Dark Horse Presents, actually. But I was in undergrad at Western Washington University. So I was aware of Hellboy and through that Dark Horse before I moved to Portland or started working for Dark Horse. But I didn't get to read the entire series until I was here.
Yeah, I was a huge Hellboy BPRD fan before working at Dark Horse. Hellboy kind of acted as like a transition title for me of when I like first started getting into comics, having it be a lot of superhero stuff. And Hellboy kind of bridges that gap a little bit, while also being very good. But yeah, I mean, it was one of my favorite books before working at Dark Horse. It still continues to be one of my favorite sets of books. I mean, my cat's name is Roger, named after the BPRD character Roger. So there's that.
I actually never asked you about that, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Your other cat is Ripley, right?
Yes.
Obvious reference.
One guess for that one. Yeah.
In our slideshow right now, we're kind of showing some of the various Mignola titles that are available now. And one of those, Frankenstein Underground, I should mention that is currently available on those free number ones that Jenny was talking about. So that's at Dark Horse Digital. And also the Mignolaversity over at multiversity.com has a special preview and interview over there too. So check that out. That link will be in our chat as well. So depending on, no matter how you became a fan of the series, I guess, what are some of your favorite books or series by Mignola and team?
I'm a big fan of the short story collections that you mentioned before. I think aside from the original 12-volume trade series, of Hellboy. I think Hellboy in Mexico is really one of my favorites, just because it acts as a real linchpin between, a Hellboy pre-1956, kind of growing up in the BPRD, figuring out his place, that sort of thing, and then Hellboy post-1956. When he gets into some of the more Beast of the Apocalypse type material. So Hellboy in Mexico is one of my favorites. And then the Hellboy short story collections that you mentioned before, Kara, are some of my favorites when I need something short to just, relax, read, have some fun, get a variety of artists and writers on board there working with Mike. It's a really good resource for that, just checking out different people's interpretations of Hellboy. So those are a couple of my personal favorites.
Excellent. How about you, Brett?
So as we'll get into a little more later, but like one of my favorite like historical time periods is the early 20th century. Or the early to mid, I'll say. So I really love all Lobster Johnson comics, just because he's the claw of justice and he's great. And there are, much like Jenny mentioned with her choice, there are a lot of really strong artists and collaborators on that. But Tonchi Zancic is, I think, one of the best artists working today, and he does a lot of Lobster Johnson, and it's super atmospheric and kind of Art Deco-y, and it's real good. So
yeah, those are really fun stories of pulp hero aspect. Well, I know that so we were talking earlier about what are some of the many books. There are just so many, we could never cover them all in one stream, of course, that Mike has written, collaborated on, done everything on. So we're going to focus on a couple today, especially. Jenny, to begin, we were going to do a little dive into BPRD Vampire. There's a second edition that came out recently. Can you tell us a bit about that? Maybe start with a little synopsis, and then we can discuss maybe how that edition differs from previous.
Absolutely. Brett mentioned Tanchi as one of his favorite artists. A couple of my personal favorite artists working right now are Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon. And BPRD Vampire, both the first and second edition, are really special to me because it's a collaboration between the twins and Mike to tell the story of one particular BPRD agent. So in 1947, Simon Anders, who worked for the BPRD, got basically seduced into being a living blood bag for two witch vampires. So right there, if you're familiar with the Mignola verse, that should kind of make your ears perk up, because witches and vampires aren't usually a combination you see. So after Simon is eventually rescued, he starts to notice some unsettling changes in himself, in his demeanor, his attitude, his outlook, and he starts to kind of question his place as an agent in the BPRD. And that's where we jump into the aptly named BPRD Vampire. So it has, as I said, the story is in collaboration with Gabriel and Fabio and Mike, and then colors for this whole story are by Dave Stewart, brilliant colorist as always. But it goes into some detail on Simon and his insight into what happened to him. He starts the process. There's definitely a lot of PTSD shades in here, and the way that that's represented both in the story and the art is fantastic. But he ends up trying to track down who is responsible for his abuse and his changes. And it gets definitely creepy, spooky. There's a lot of kind of surrealist, psychedelic kind of mental trips that happen. And at the end of the story, you're still not sure if he's going to end up as a good guy or a bad guy. I say this because in the Mignola verse, there's always shades of gray. But so that's where the first edition, or the first edition of this collection stops. In the second edition that we're just releasing, there's a special little add-on, which is a story from I believe it's the 2018 Hellboy Winter Special. And it's a story about Simon after the end of BPRD Vampire. And it's kind of just it's this very small window, I think it's only 8 pages, into what happened to him and what he's been doing in the meantime. And it's beautiful because I won't give anything away, but it also ties him in to some other villains and or kind of NPC type characters that we've seen elsewhere in the Mignolaverse. So I very much think that Simon could potentially have a bigger role to play, hopefully in continued collaboration between Gabriel and Fabio and Mike and Dave. But this is a great collection of where Simon gets to where he is and what he starts to do with his new and changed position. So I've reread this thing a dozen times at least, and I still love it. I still always see new details that I adore. So definitely go pick it up, even if you haven't read much more of the early Mignolaverse, which I think Brett is going to talk about and fill in some gaps there. You can pick up BPRD Vampire 2nd edition. It's just the 1 volume right now, so you can read it easy peasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that 2nd edition came out not long ago, so that should still be widely available. As Jenny said, Fabio Moon, Gabriel Ba, of course, also known for Umbrella Academy, and they've collaborated on some of our Neil Gaiman adaptations. Just brilliant artists, a treat to work with. BPRD Vampire, I'm glad that we brought it back in a newer edition that everyone can get. The sketchbook in the back is fantastic in that collection. The bonus story that you mentioned from the Winter Special is so good. There are so many critters in that, which we're going to dive into that a little bit more later. But I'm really happy that you picked that one to focus on. I think BPRD Vampire is a fantastic jumping on point for folks. Similar art team on the one that Brett picked. Brett, you were going to talk about BPRD 1946 to 1948, which is a newer collection.
Yes. So this is actually a collection of 3 miniseries that have come out kind of across BPRD's publishing history, for lack of a better term. So they're all standalone stories, but they all are tied together. They do have a kind of like an overarching theme between them, other than the time period. I do want to initially jump into the middle of it. So 1947 is kind of that story about Anders becoming the human body bag for those vampires. It's also by Bon Moon, are the artist on that one as well. So they are tied together. You don't need to read one to read the other, but if you like one, you're going to like the other one for sure. But so these 3 series, I'm just going to call them 3 miniseries, even though they're collected in one book. They're a trade, just came out last month, and there was a hardcover edition of it in the past. The first series is drawn by Paul Azaceta, who hasn't done a huge amount of, I think this is the only Hellboy verse stuff that he's done. Mm-hmm. And seeing him draw these characters is a huge treat because he's an amazing artist. With Dave Stewart colors. That's kind of more of a little bit of a classic supernatural World War II war story about a team like going to investigate this vampire Sturm project that Hitler has, because Hitler is like now famously known as being obsessed with the occult, which is very much tied into Hellboy's origin story as well. And that's kind of the introduction of a lot of these people, like Anders and Broom, like leading an early team of not BPRD agents, but BPRD agents in the field. And there's a giant ape monster in it, and that's always great. So, and then as it moves on, 1947, as I said, is kind of that Anders story about becoming a body bag for these vampires, and Broom trying to save him, and like sending the BPRD out to try to get him to not be a human body bag, which has middling effects, I'll say. But 1948, which is drawn by Max Fiumara, who has done a lot of Ape Sapien stuff now. That kind of ties more into what we know BPRD leads to in these giant monster kaiju like Agdruhem, Agdru characters. So, and it ties into this. I'm gonna butcher this word, but it's substance Ankleodite. Is that what it is? Yes. So, like, and that is a big plot device for much of BPRD going forward, and it's that's like more of a classic like monster miniseries. But I think overarching these 3. You get like 3 character arcs that are very important, I think, moving forward. You see Hellboy be found during the war, and then as a young kid, obsessed with Lobster Johnson, eating pancakes on base in 1947. 1948, he is discovering that he himself is not like everyone else around him. And he's trying to come to grips with that kind of stuff, which is the beginning of him questioning himself all the time, which is at the heart of Hellboy. But you also have Broom going from curious to obsessed to too obsessed in actively sending people to their death, and he knew he was sending people to their death in 1948. And also this pays off more in Vampire, but Simon Anders kind of just gets a tar beaten out of him for like 12 issues. But I think it's really emblematic of soldiers and PTSD, and how do you cope with what you saw after it's all over. And there's a lot of symbolism there. I'm not about to write an essay about that kind of stuff because I'm not an expert, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. The art's amazing. Dave Stewart, even though there's 3 different art teams, ties it all together. Josh Dysart wrote the first 2 minis, and then John Arcudi, BPRD stalwart, wrote the last one. So, yeah.
So these are both anybody who wants to explore some of these characters that are introduced in the greater Hellboy universe. These 2 volumes that we've talked about are, I think, great ways to really go into the deeper dive of those character explorations. So we have, again, BPRD 1946 to 1948, which is newly collected in trade paperback, and also BPRD Vampire, newly available in a 2nd edition with an expanded sketchbook and a bonus story at the end. Both available widely now. Comic shops and bookstores are currently, a lot of them are offering online ordering and curbside pickup and options like that. So I recommend checking comicshoplocator.com or indiebound.org to check which shops are near you, and then just contact them to see what their current ordering and other options are at the moment. I know things are a little crazy right now with quarantine, but that is the best recommendation in addition to your usual online outlets. Our books, especially our collections, our graphic novels, are still available through bookstores and sites like Amazon as well. So there should be some options. And we also have all those digital deals. So check out digital.darkhorse.com, Comixology, all of that. These books and the whole Mignola library are at your fingertips on those digital sites right now. I mean, now is a great time to get into the Hellboy universe, the BPRD expanded universe. If you haven't, there is so much more Mignola out there than I think maybe a lot of people realize. There is, of course, that main Hellboy storyline. And we did reach, Hellboy in Hell was a bit of a conclusion, but also not. A lot of people may not know, but I mean, Hellboy has been still ongoing. We have Hellboy in the BPRD, which, yes, a lot of that goes back in time to these vignettes like Brett was just talking about, 1946 to 1948. There's so much more to explore, and that Mignola and his collaborators are still exploring. A recent spin-off, for example, was Crimson Lotus. That explores kind of, I don't even really want to say villain, because as Jenny said, everything is a bit gray in this universe. And I'm so resisting making a Sir Edward Grey pun right now. Like, you don't even know. But Crimson Lotus is an excellent side series that's currently available. One of my personal favorites, though, is Kashe the Deathless. That is a deep dive into another character who was introduced originally as kind of a villain. I mean, he's pit against Hellboy, but it's not necessarily his choice. It's not something he would have done just on his own. I don't really think anybody would just go up to Hellboy and be like, yeah, let's fight. Unless that was like their whole point of existence, maybe, was to pick fights with large demons. But Kashe is a fascinating character that I'm so glad we got to explore further in Kashe the Deathless. That was a mini-series that is now collected in a trade paperback as well. I can't recommend it highly enough. And it contains some of my favorite critters and creatures in the whole expanded Mignola universe. Specifically, we are going to talk about some of the birds and other critters. There is one called the Nightingale that appears in Kashe the Deathless, who is, I mean, it's not really a bird, it's some sort of demon. And the sound of its voice basically kills all who hear it. And it's represented with this one single little note. And I just love it so much. We talk about these various Mignola and, his collaborators, the art, and especially these critters, because they're just so iconic in appearance. I often joke about getting tattoos of these things, and I mean, like, it never actually happens, but I think this would make a fantastic tattoo, personally. We can dive more into the critters in a bit. Another one of my favorites, though, is the turkey, of course, from Hellboy in Mexico, which Jenny mentioned earlier. Vampires, I mean, they're basically vampires. The monsters in Mexico, their alternative form is not a bat, like maybe European traditional vampires. It's a turkey, but it's a very vicious looking turkey. It drips blood. And we have some other items. There it is. There's that drip. See, that's another great tattoo. Look at that. Look at that. Or something. I mean, I would frame just that panel on my wall. Also, speaking of Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba, they worked on Hellboy in Mexico also. Mm-hmm. So those are two of my personal favorite birds. We also have a few other of our favorite critters ready. Jenny and I were talking about Mac, the dog.
Yes, Mac is one of my favorite critters. I was very lucky. I grew up with a very sweet lab who took very good care of me. His name was Tuck, not Mac, but close, one syllable. And so I've always had a huge soft spot for Mac, who is, of course, Hellboy's childhood dog. Grow up together. And I think Mac is really an important character, even though he doesn't really have a lot of his own story told, because he loves Hellboy unconditionally. He doesn't care that he's a little demon boy. He doesn't care that he's going to, potentially grow up to be the beast of the apocalypse. Doesn't care about the right hand of doom, except that it can throw a baseball really far, which is really cool. But he's just Hellboy's pal. And we were doing the math before we started streaming, but Mac doesn't live that long for a dog. I think we figured he lives like 10-ish years. And not a lot of spoilers here, but I think that his importance to Hellboy's development as a person really gets brought to the forefront when he dies, because that impact has such a that event has such a huge impact on Hellboy. It sends him in really a spiral, and results in some of his most, I would call them, ludicrous and kind of almost sensational and ill-fated adventures. Is all because he suddenly doesn't have Mac anymore. And you can argue, well, he's still got his dad and he's still got the BPRD and whatnot, but we could have a whole other live stream about Broom's parenting skills. And BPRD folks, even though they love him and care about him, there's always that subtext of where Hellboy came from and what he potentially has the power to do. So Mac, throughout all the years, from 1946 and 47, like Brett was talking about, up through his death in 1956, has a serious impact on Hellboy as a person that we see really felt not through Mac's story necessarily, but through how Hellboy reacts to Mac.
Yeah.
It was a very nice tie-in, I thought, between some of the various Hellboy stories. It helps explain why Hellboy takes off on some of those adventures, and what was the motivation behind that. Why did he suddenly go on such a spiral in say Mexico?
Hypothetically.
And so the image we have showing right now is, of course, from the classic short Pancakes, which is where I think we first see Mac. I think. I've been going through some of my, extensive home library, and I have my old copies of Hellboy Weird Tales, which I have volumes 1 and 2 at home. The very first story of Weird Tales actually is all about Mac. It's a fun little, just sort of silly, strange short. Those are 2 more volumes I recommend highly. You can get those on Dark Horse Digital too. Weird Tales are just, the collections of Hellboy short stories are some of the best, I think, most captivating material. We talked earlier about how Jenny and Brett came to the sort of Hellboy or Mignola universe. For me, I also actually found Hellboy originally through short stories. For me, I believe it was the Dark Horse Book of Hauntings, one of those horror collections, and each one of those includes a Hellboy short. So that was my first introduction to Hellboy, and as soon as I found that, I was hooked. I had to get everything I could. And that includes just like how beautiful the books themselves are. Very nice hardcovers, definitely appealed to my sort of, I guess, closet goth sensibilities, sort of a dark Victorian look and feel to just the entire book's production. Those are now collected in the Dark Horse Book of Horror, so you can get all three in one. I was talking about Kashe the Deathless and that Nightingale. So Kashe, and I know the spelling is, you'll see it spelled in various ways. That's another character from folklore, of course. His tale in the Hellboy universe is very intertwined with the Baba Yaga. And so throughout Kashe the Deathless, the Nightingale is just one of many adventures we get to see as we go. And so basically, Kashe is telling Hellboy his story over drinks at a pub in hell. And that is the setting of this excellent miniseries. And so the Nightingale is one of those adventures that he goes on. We learn his tragic backstory about how he became the Deathless, essentially cursed to serve another. And it's just, I don't want to spoil anything. It's a bit difficult to talk about the plot without giving things away, but that's one of my personal favorite miniseries in the whole of the Mignolaverse. So I would recommend that highly. And if nothing else, you have this fabulous little Nightingale who appears periodically. And there are so many other fun critters in that series. Brett, you and I were talking about birds and other creatures. What are some of your favorites that appear throughout?
So I can't remember his name. He definitely has a name. But in BPRD, like right in between the end of Plague of Frogs and the beginning of Hell on Earth, Panya in the base in Colorado has a ape, like pelican head aped creature that just like runs around and causes mischief. And that's like my favorite non-main character of BPRD, just making Johan want to die all the time and stealing people's keys. And he's great. He's just the best.
Stealing keys, as you do.
Yeah.
I just got to notice that actually our artist on Lady Baltimore, Bridget Connell, is here in the chat.
Oh, hi, Bridget.
Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited for that series.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones that we had just announced, unfortunately, before coronavirus kind of took hold. And so that's one of our series that is currently on hold. As soon as we can announce new release dates for that, we absolutely will. I'm so excited. Bridget's art is amazing. Jenny, you're working on that series, I assume?
Yes, and we're super excited. It's going to be fantastic. Christopher Golden, Bridget Connell. I can't wait to be able to show it to everybody because they are just knocking it out of the park. It's wonderful. Every time we get anything new in, it's like a tiny little Christmas to just see what's progressing and how. So it's going to be worth the wait, I promise. And Kara will have balloons and firecrackers and other stuff when we get to announce the actual release date.
Pretty much, yes. That is entirely correct. Yeah, I'm excited to have Christopher Golden join us later this week. We'll talk about Baltimore quite a bit on Friday. Maybe I'll see if Bridget wants to join us too. We'll see. Yeah, so again, that'll be 11 a.m. Pacific on Friday here on Twitch. We are working with creators in very diverse time zones, so we'll be sure to update if anything has to change with that, but that is the plan for now, 11 a.m. Pacific, and we'll translate that into various time zones for you as we get a little closer. Jenny and Brett, we have got another question from the chat, actually. If the BPRD, I'm going to go with the BPRD because there's just too many others. If there could be a crossover between the BPRD and any other universe or team, what would your dream crossover be? Oh, man. There's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
That's
I think I want everyone to notice this synergy that's about to happen here, but I would, for a couple reasons, I would love to see the Beefeater universe crossover with the Black Hammer universe. From like an outside of comics perspective, I just want to see Jeff write these characters. But I think their temperaments would play well against each other. In that they're like all kind of reluctant all the time about it. And Liz and Golden Gal are like perfect team. So yeah.
This did actually come up in our Black Hammer stream last week. I was thinking about like how Kate Corrigan would maybe interact in that situation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like she and Gail might butt heads.
Yeah. I assume Gail's gonna butt heads with all of them. But
I love Gail. I love her so much.
Any child who can like eat a pack of cigarettes while staring you down, fundamentally, I both fear and respect. So.
I do intend to have a Gale costume at some point, like maybe this upcoming Halloween. It's really just an excuse to be as sweary and ridiculous as Gale is, but I just love her. It'll be fun.
Excellent.
What do you think, Jenny? Is that too broad?
No, I think I'm gonna go kind of away from the traditional like superhero crossover. And I'm gonna pull something a little weird that people might not have heard of. But there's an excellent series called Heathen by Natasha Altarisi and Rachel Deering. It comes from Vault Comics, and it's a queer like Norse adventure romance. And so I would looking at a lot of the Norse mythology. That Hellboy has dealt with and some of the types of monsters and deities and whatnot that kind of fit in his world. I would love to see a Hellboy Heathen crossover, to see them fight some monsters together. I think that would be really cool and kind of be less about necessarily the personality interactions and more about just watching awesome teams beat up monsters together, because I love what I love.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, right? It's those monsters.
It's true. And I love Norse mythology to begin with, so both of those together would just be amazing.
Speaking of which, that's a good call out. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
No, you can. I thought of another answer that would just be hilarious to me.
What is it?
So I kind of want, I don't know if it even just Hellboy maybe to like exist in the Locas Jaime Hernandez Love and Rockets world. Just because I feel like they would accept the weirdness part of it, because I mean Costigan's a devil. But then he could just hang out, and they would just hang out together and it'd be great. And he'd get annoyed with them, they'd get annoyed with him, and there'd be so much great Jaime Hernandez stuff happening.
Some drinking with skeletons, maybe.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. That is fantastic. All I was going to say earlier is that Norse mythology, of course, is one of our other upcoming series, which we'll announce new release dates for as soon as we can. But we are adapting Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology into comics, which is super exciting. And Mike Mignola is one of the art collaborators on that series. So look for that soon. We'll definitely blast that far and wide as soon as we have new release dates for that series, expanding our Neil Gaiman library. I have to say my cat is still literally draped over my arm just off camera. So this is somewhat distracting, but also fitting again, because of course Hellboy, and people know from the movies that he likes cats. Although as Jenny and I covered in the comics, he has a dog. It's true. Mike has he's told the story of kind of how the cats came to be actually on a panel, probably more than one. But the one I'm thinking of took place at San Diego Comic-Con a couple of years ago. And somebody asked about the cats, and he told how that was Guillermo del Toro's wife, actually, who's a veterinarian or something similar. And she had a whole bunch of cats that she was caring for, I think feral cats, and they made their way into the film and kind of stuck. And that's really the origin of Hellboy and the cats. So we actually went through a few other critters before the stream, just because we were all really into this idea. Are there any others that you two would like to call out from the greater Mignola universe? Dogs, birds, or otherwise? I think, Jenny, you and I were talking about the insult bird.
Yes, the add insult to injury bird. One of the things that really caught my eye in the original Hellboy series is the fact that it's the small creatures, the oft overlooked sort of like background burbs, if you will, the little songbirds and sparrows and whatnot, who end up carrying important messages or having important insights and whatnot. Bigger birds like owls or birds of prey or whatnot are more associated with, witches or other demons, evil, that sort of thing. So what I love about the insult to injury bird, who shows up in one page in a short story called The Exorcist of Vorsk, which originally was released in Dark Horse Presents, I believe, is it just shows up at the end of this story about this poor exorcist who made a mistake and now is dead in a tree in hell, like Yendo. And it just shows up expressly to say, oh, by the way, your miserable wife, who was the cause of all of your problems, is now very happy and living without you with a demon who treats her very well. And Hellboy's reaction is, I think, what gets me about this, because his reaction is just, what are you, the add insult to injury bird? And I mean, the bird's telling the truth. It's not lying. It kind of was a contrast with some of the other insightful things that small birds say and have to offer in the Mignolaverse. This one's really just there to make you miserable with the truth.
Yeah, every time you say insult bird, as I mentioned before, it makes me think of questionable content for anybody else who remembers that, because we had yelling bird.
Yeah.
Very different, but still a kind of a similar element of humor, which is, of course, one of those things that probably most of us love about Hellboy is it's serious and everybody has these intense backstories and they're such well-developed characters and they're dealing with all this trauma, but at the same time, Hellboy always brings that sense of humor, and is known for, like I would say probably one of his taglines is just, "Aw, crap."
Crap, and
son of a, yeah. I'm pretty sure that's our 404 not found error page. It's
son of a. I think going back to what you said earlier about Black Hammer character, though, I think that if Golden Gale were going to be a bird, I think she'd be Yelling Bird.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We also talked a bit about monkeys. There's a lot of monkeys and apes that appear throughout the comics. Of course, the infamous monkey with the gun. One of everybody's favorite panels, of course. I think I hear about that, pancakes, and drinking with skeletons. Yeah. Probably the most out of all. And again, it's that humor. It's so perfect. That pancake short alone is gold. Also, I don't know, a lot of people remember The Amazing Screw-On Head, which is, of course, not Hellboy, but that's another one that's just interesting little shorts and that fantastic humor coming through. Very subtle, very dry. Maybe that's why I like it so much, because that kind of describes my sense of humor, too, actually. So, another fun question for us all. If the BPRD were in quarantine, how do you think they would pass the time?
I think Kate Corrigan would be freaking out without enough paperwork and scheduling to do.
Fair. I agree.
Yeah, I think the obvious answer for some of them, like for Hellboy and Liz, would be like they're just smoking or drinking, like. But I get the impression that most of them would be actively trying to help people. I mean, I think Kate, just so she had something to organize, would be like, how are we helping? What are we doing? Kind of deal. I
think,
and I could see Johan like digging through, studying things to try to solve a problem. But
I feel like Broom knows how to use a sewing machine too.
Yeah.
I feel like he can sew some masks. I like him, the image of him with like an antique sewing machine with like a little treadle on it. Just,
I love that. Now I'm like picturing that comic, actually. I don't know who would draw that. Maybe Mike.
Yeah.
Maybe you can add that. So, Mike, if people haven't been seeing this, although if you're a fan, I'm sure you have. So Mike Mignola has been at home in quarantine doing sketches all day, every day, sketches of all sorts of things, and like SpongeBob. And these are being auctioned off on eBay to benefit charity. So I'm not sure, maybe our mods can drop a link in the chat to those, but absolutely go look at Mike's own social media, because right now he is posting sketches pretty much every day. And most are being auctioned. We have some that are collaborations with other artists who are inking or coloring over Mike's sketches too. And there's just some phenomenal work. Like Eric Powell collaborated with him on a Where the Wild Things Are piece, which was just beautiful. So that's really fun. I've been enjoying those. So we also have some other Hellboy related items that we wanted to talk about and show you, which could be additional ways to maybe pass the time in quarantine if you are at home. One of which is, of course, Hellboy the board game, which is available now through retailers. It began as a Kickstarter, and I think Jenny has the Kickstarter box.
I have the enormous Kickstarter box. I'm going to try not to strain anything while I show all y'all.
It's huge. Well done getting that up on camera. That whole box is packed with layer after layer after layer of miniatures. And if you know Mike Mignola, if you know Hellboy, if you know the BPRD, you know that's going to include a lot of frog monsters, which is why frogs is our keyword for the giveaway, incidentally. Hashtag or # frogs to enter the giveaway once and only once in the chat. Frog monsters, we have Hellboy, which you can see now in our slideshow. That's the standard Hellboy. That one is professionally painted by the folks who work with Mantic. I'm afraid to tell you all that you have to paint your own. And when you look at that, these images that are now showing of what you get with the game, so that shows the unpainted minis. And I have yet to paint most of my own, because there are, I swear, thousands of them, but I will show you. This is my little miniature Hellboy with horns. Try and get him up close to my camera so you can maybe see him a bit. We've also been sharing images on our social media, so at Dark Horse Comics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for some more of this goodness. But that's Horned Hellboy, which was a Kickstarter special. There are some others that you can add on if you go to Mantic's website still. This was a special. I think this may be sold out now, but check their website to see what is still available. This is Krampus, of course, known from Hellboy Krampusnacht, the one-shot, which won an Eisner, art by the amazing Adam Hughes. Again, mine's not painted, but I love this mini. It's got all these little like skulls in the bookcase because, Krampus.
And Mantic did a really good job on these. Like their process, I mean, all the designs were run by Mike. Like this was a really collaborative effort, and they did amazing things with it.
I'll hold these up again. There's also Holiday Hellboy, which that was a limited edition. I think I still have the box art too. Mike and Dave Stewart also did the box art for all of these things. So there's more beautiful Mike and Dave artwork across the game box, across these individual pieces, all available through Mantic Games. Again, some of these are limited editions, so I'm afraid I can't help you there if they're ones that have already gone by, but here's the basic Hellboy with paint set also, so you can attempt to nail those dark Dave Stewart colors. I can't speak highly enough about these things. I wasn't really into minis before this, even though I do play a lot of tabletop games. But this particular game with its literal thousands of miniatures has definitely gotten me into that. Actually, if you folks at home are interested, we'll try to see if we can collaborate with our friends at Mantic to have them on a stream sometime, and we can go through maybe a playthrough of Hellboy the board game, maybe go through the rules. Jenny and Brett, I don't know if you have played it at home yourselves. It's a little complicated to learn, but once you get the hang of it, it's really fun.
Yeah, I haven't played. I have it. I haven't played it yet. It's kind of something that me and my fiance Sam have been looking at. Just like we should do that. Yeah, but it's kind of an overwhelming amount of things that are in the box in a good way. So we'll crack into it at some point. We're excited about it, but
yeah,
it's worth taking the plunge. I've played it a couple of times, and it's a lot of fun once you get the hang of it. There's some really good playthroughs, simple playthroughs up on the web that I watched before I started, and they were very helpful. So don't be intimidated by the size of the box.
It is, and there's more than one, because then there's an entire expansion, multiple expansions. Hellboy in Mexico is, of course, one of my favorites, which includes that turkey I was just talking about. You get a turkey miniature, or at least you did if you backed the Kickstarter, which, I mean, if anything was going to get me to back that Kickstarter, it was that. Like, if I needed more encouragement anyway. And Mike, as Jenny was saying, consulted, he made sure to check out every miniature before they were finalized and went into production. So everything, including that turkey, is accurate to the comics, including the snood, which is the little thing that droops down one side of its beak. Katie O'Brien, who's the editor on the series, works with Jenny. She had to go through and verify and make sure that the snood was in the proper placement. So a lot of attention to detail. And that is also, I think, why I'm kind of intimidated by like the thought of painting these minis. I want to do them justice, and I've never painted minis before, so I'm afraid to mess them up.
It's not helpful that I don't know if this was Mantic or Mantic shared it. The people that they had paint those minis were so good.
Oh yeah.
Like, okay, way to set the bar way too high for me.
The guy who painted the horned Hellboy, actually, he chimed in on Instagram, I saw, so we've definitely given him a shout out. And Mantic has shared some of his original paint, and he'll talk about like which colors he uses, which is helpful to a point. I'm still intimidated though. I still won't do as good a job. Jenny also has, I think, the Hellboy puzzle with her.
Yes, I've got, so I'm a puzzle fan. I know puzzles are very divisive, but in these desperate times of quarantine, they could be your new best friend. We've got a whole line, Dark Horse has a whole line of puzzles with different art on them. I know we've got an Umbrella Academy one. We've got this Hellboy one with art from the incredible Mike Mignola with Dave Stewart. I know, there's a couple from The Witcher that we have, but I'm a puzzle snob, and I love these puzzles and I love these pieces, partially because the colors are so nice and bright, but also because, I'll try and show you the texture here. They've got a really nice texture on the puzzle piece. I don't know if that's coming through at all. But so the ink stays fast. It doesn't come off on your fingers or anything. The side pieces don't come up. The color portion doesn't start to flake off or anything. I put this puzzle together a couple of times and it's still holding up great. So yeah, I'm a big puzzle plugger, and I especially love puzzles with great art like this one. So this is a 1,000 piece. It's 20 by 27. Definitely worth playing with if you're a puzzle fan.
Yeah, we've been featuring our puzzles lately because of quarantine, especially, and we had been seeing that people were doing them and we're interested in getting more of them. So if you are doing one of our puzzles, as Jenny said, there's Hellboy, there's Umbrella Academy, 2 Witcher, 2 Game of Thrones, and we actually have a Cyberpunk 2077 puzzle coming up soon, which is up for pre-order now. Yeah, Gary, our awesome tech guy, is showing you those now on our website. Thank you for bringing those up, Gary. So those are all available. And if you use the hashtag DHPuzzles, we've been sharing your puzzle progress on our social media, and we will continue doing that. And I think we'll see with the increase in popularity of these, maybe we'll do some more in the future. I don't know. We also have coloring books. We don't have one yet for anything in the Hellboy universe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if that becomes a possibility. But this puzzle is gorgeous. They are difficult, I think, our puzzles compared to some others. We had been trying to put this puzzle together in the office before we all started working from home. Because we usually do like a puzzle station at our booths at conventions, and people can come by and work on the puzzle for a bit. So we were trying to put one together ourselves to use in that display, and even with our whole staff in that building working on it, it's still like 1/3 of the way done.
Is that the Hellboy one, or is that a different one?
We were working on the Hellboy one, and we were also working on the Umbrella Academy one.
That one tripped me up. The Umbrella Academy one, gorgeous art, but it's all in kind of pale pinks and tans, and that got to me a little bit.
Yeah, the colors they make it a little difficult because it's beautiful art, but the colors are similar enough that the pieces are difficult to put together. We just sent out the final reminder about entering the giveaway in the chat. We're going to pull the winner in just a few moments. So remember, it's the keyword is frogs, and enter that once with the little # or hashtag frogs. And that is your entry in the giveaway. I have a few fun questions before we wrap it up. And my first question is for Brett.
Yes.
If the BPRD were to form a hockey team, who would play which position and why?
This is right in my wheelhouse. Now we're entering. So I'm gonna narrow it down to 6 of them because I'm not filling out a whole roster, and I'll say Broom's the coach.
Yes.
So Kate is definitely the goalie. She's the fastest on her feet in terms of decision making, and she can kind of guide the team if they're in her zone. A lot of the personalities are kind of similar, so I struggled on this quite a bit. But I think the defensive pair is Hellboy and Roger. Roger the homunculus, because you need to put Roger and Hellboy together because Roger has to do everything that Hellboy does because he looks up to him so much. And I think you get a little bit of that, like, not super familiar. Remember if they play together a lot, but that late 80s, like Calgary Flames, Lanny McDonald, Al McInnes combo happening of like a young guy and Roger and like an older stalwart teaching him the ways, and Hellboy is Lanny McDonald, but real deep dive in the 80s hockey for no reason. And I think the forward line is centered by Abe, because Abe is like the tactical leader of BPRD, at least to me. And the wingers are Johan, who's like an elusive tactician type guy, and Kate, who is like, she's the finisher. She's the Alex Ovechkin. She's gonna stand on the point and fire it home whenever she needs to. No pun intended. But but I think that's a team to beat for the BPRD. So
can you please write a fan fiction about like an interagency hockey tournament, please?
God, they'd be so angry with each other all the time.
in my mind, I'm turning all of this into soccer because that's my sport. And I mean, it's not dissimilar. I agree with most of your choices. I have not yet given it much thought, but I'll report back in a future stream. I'll let you know what my BPRD soccer lineup would be. Yeah. I'm going to give Jenny the next one, even though I actually had a bonus for Brett. So Jenny, if the BPRD formed a band, who would play which instrument, and what kind of band is it?
All right. First instinct, I think they would definitely be power metal. I think they could. It would be a good way to kind of slip in some lyrics about cases that they may or not be officially able to acknowledge and or talk about. But it's power metal, so it's always full of epic everything anyway. Lineup. I think Kate Corrigan would be on drums. I would love to get her behind a kit and just watch her work her rage out. I would love to see her going at it, especially with the pedals. Just absolutely let it go. Just let it go. I think on Hellboy would need like some kind of modified instrument just because he's got the right hand of doom. But I think Hellboy would probably be on bass. Shout out to Rob Vanderloo for Epica and his awesome Hellboy bass.
Oh, that's right.
From Dingwall Guitars. If you have not checked out that bass, that Hellboy bass, please go do it. It's gorgeous.
We affectionately refer to that as the Hell bass.
It may or may not be the background on my work computer. Yeah. So I think Hellboy would be on bass. I think he would enjoy the chance to not be front and center, but still, get to hang out, get to do some cool stuff, get to support, the other instruments around him and whatnot. Plus, it'd probably be easier to pick those nice thick strings with that right hand of doom, or hit those nice hard notes if he's playing lefty. I think, let's see, rhythm. I'm thinking about this. I think I'd put Roger on rhythm guitar for some similar reasons for what Brett said. So they can kind of hang out together, Hellboy and Roger, just play some stuff together, and then leave room for Abe to definitely take lead guitar. I think, again, what with his tactical mind, I think Abe would be an incredible, like, technical metal player. I would love to see him shred. I bet Abe can shred. And which leaves Liz on vocals, which would be great. But then I think Johan would be a good lyricist. So maybe it's a collaborative effort between Liz and Johan. I think he could write the songs and then she could sing them. Plus, she would have the pyrotechnics show with her.
Yeah. So I like this a lot.
Some power metal, maybe some classic rock covers when they're wanting to play around a little bit. I could see them playing some Sabbath. Could see them playing some Maiden.
I'm going to need to see some fan fiction of both of these now. Yeah. And that also applies to my final question for Brett, because I couldn't decide which of these two to ask him, and so I just asked both. But so this ties into Hellboy in Mexico also, with the luchadors. Brett, if the BPRD were to also want to follow in Hellboy's footsteps, essentially, and become pro wrestlers, what are their pro wrestling names and personas?
Oh, this is the names portion, I think, is particularly difficult because I think a lot of them would keep their names or do a play on it. Like, I think Roger would just be the homunculus or things like that.
Rage Sapien.
Yeah. I think Abe and Liz would have a hard time wanting to go by anything other than their actual names. But yeah, that's beside the point. Anyway, I think, like, wrestling style-wise, this is kind of where I was digging in a little bit. I actually, even though this isn't, like, technically a luchador thing, it kind of is, but it isn't. But I think Hellboy is very much strong style wrestler. To say what that actually means is like he's very stiff. So like every punch or kick or mostly slaps would be really hard. Like if you're watching it, it feels like it's painful. And he's not really holding back. He's working super. I'm using a lot of wrestling terms, and I know this is not where I should be doing that. But I think Abe and Johan are both mat tacticians, so they're both like almost traditional wrestling, like Greco-Roman or Olympic wrestling. So like they're submission based, a lot of super executed, like perfectly executed moves. If you know, like a lot like Kurt Angle, any wrestling people.
Greco-Roman wrestling confuses me, by the way.
Man, this is difficult. 'Cause I think in a way they're all kind of also brawlers. Like they're all doing a lot of punching and kicking.
So maybe some of them are more like MMA cage fight.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and we're living in the understanding that they've all bought into it. Like they're not like in the most recent Hellboy movie. Hellboy's very much like he's very standoffish when he's in there with the demon. But we're gonna say that they are actively wrestling. They're not like I don't want to be a part of this situation, because that's no fun.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like picturing a line of like Kenner toys or something, sort of like the old wrestling toys you could get, but it's BPRD.
I mean, I'm gonna do a little plug here as well, but I probably should have consulted the wrestling expert Aubrey Sitterson on this before I answered this question.
Ooh. Okay, well, we'll just have to have Aubrey on as a guest soon, and we'll talk about No One Left to Fight.
Yes.
And wrestling and all of that. Yes, that's a fantastic idea, which we should do once we've figured out our updated release date for that trade too.
Yes.
All things are in flux right now, but we'll get there. Well, thank you both for your time. I don't want to take up, our whole day, although we could sit around and do this with BPRD probably all day. Thank you, everybody, for following along. We did just draw a winner for Hellboy Omnibus Volume 1, and that has been announced in the chat. The winner is JTHD35. That's the username. All you need to do is type !claim in the chat, or we'll whisper you afterwards, or you can whisper us, but basically just send us a private message here on Twitch and we will work out your claim and your shipping with you. Congratulations, Hellboy Omnibus Volume 1. That is pretty much all we have time for today. I don't see any additional questions from the chat that have come up. So thank you again, Brett and Jenny, for taking the time to do this little dive into the expansive Mignola universe at Dark Horse, and we've barely scratched the surface, right? We focused on a few titles for the sake of being able to focus, and I very much appreciate you two for helping out with that and talking about some of your favorites. We talked about BPRD Vampire and BPRD 1946 to 1948, as well as Cachet the Deathless, all of which are collected in paperback now and are on Dark Horse Digital. Everything's 50% off right now. Plus, we have some free #1, so check that out for sure. Something to help us all out, pass the time while we are staying home and in quarantine. If you are working with a local comic shop or bookstore, of course, we absolutely appreciate that you support those local shops. So again, comicshoplocator.com and indiebound.org are great websites to find ones that are near you so that you can see what they're offering right now. I know, so we're based in the Portland area at Dark Horse, and all of our local comic shops and bookstores are working really hard to still offer things for people. And like Books with Pictures, for example, she is delivering all over town herself. So there's a lot of efforts like that. Powell's Books, for example, has tons of graphic novels. I don't know if people realize that you can order from their website no matter where you are, and they're doing a lot of shipping as well. And same goes for many other local shops in everybody's areas. So please do check that out as an option. And we haven't even touched on so many other Mignola series that I can't recommend highly enough. Baltimore is one of my favorites. We mentioned that briefly. We'll come back to that on Friday, which you should tune in on Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific when we have Christopher Golden, the amazing writer of Baltimore, Joe Golem, and much more, as well as Warwick Johnson-Cadwell, who is another fantastic Mignola collaborator on Our Encounters with Evil and Mr. Higgins Comes Home. And just announced today on this stream, Ben Stenbeck will also be joining us, which is super exciting. His art is amazing. There are so many fantastic Mignola collaborators. I'd love to have them all join us, but we're super excited for those three guests, especially on Friday. So tune in then for that. And with that, I will say farewell. Have a great afternoon. Thank you again, Brett. Thank you again, Jenny. And we will be back probably next Wednesday for another backlist new to you comic book day rundown as well. So thank you all and have a good afternoon.